Welcome to Rosie's. Today we're going to go over some common soldering mistakes and soldering problems you'll run into in making jewelry with silver solder. We're going to make a video today demonstrating some of these techniques that we would commonly use in making sterling silver jewelry. We hope you like this video. If you do, please hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe and add any questions or comments you have at the bottom. We really appreciate it. We're going to show you some of the tips right here on the bench. Before we get into the tips today, let's go over the material we're going to use in this video. We're going to use 4 types of solder: hard, medium, easy, and extra easy. We'll demonstrate some sheet solder and some wire solder. Both of them interchangeable. It's just an ease of use. For cleaning our bare metal, we're going to use a scruffy pad or some fine sandpaper could be used. In flux, we use a paste flux today, and there's several great liquid products out there on the market that could also be used. I prefer paste flux. I'll mix it down with some water and apply it with a paintbrush. In the video today, we'll be using a ceramic block, a hard charcoal block, and a soldering tripod. The torch we'll be using is a small art torch. The first tip I'd like to share with you today is to make sure you mark and keep your solder separated by the type you're using. I use a Sharpie to mark it with the 56. I use a scribe and mark it also. And then the containers are marked. With the wire, I mark the container that it's in and keep the container separated. After you mark your silver solder, mark your container and keep the two separated. The heat ranges of these 4 solders is important, and it's important to keep them separate for use. Mixing up the different solders will cause disastrous results in your jewelry. Being able to use solder in 4 steps, hard, medium, easy, and extra easy, will let you do 4 separate soldering operations without affecting the first. Step 2 is cleaning your silver, removing the contamination. This is a very important step. We want to start with a clean, unoxidized surface in order for the silver solder to flow. There's several ways to clean this piece. We can use sandpaper. I prefer the 3M scruffy pad. With a little effort, it'll take the oxidation, grease, fingerprints, whatever's on here off, and we'll have a clean surface for the solder to flow. If we were to try to solder on this piece right now without cleaning off the oxidation and grease and fingerprints, the solder would not flow. It would end up staying balled up and would not wick down the joint properly. The third tip I'd like to point out is the fitment of the 2 pieces you're trying to solder together. Solder will fill a gap. Solder works by a capillary action following the seam you've made. The fit is critical in this step. With this step here, I'm going to show you an example of a joint that we're going to solder that's fit very well and one that's fit poorly. And we'll see that the solder flows nicely down this one and won't flow on this one. What are you doing? This ring has an obviously bad gap right here. But just for the sake of demoing, we'll solder it. We'll put some flux on it, add some solder. Run a reducing flame here. We dry our solder out. Boil the flux off. Once the joint's dry, we'll add more heat. Get our solder to flow. As you can see in this clip right here, the solder only flowed where it was touching and did not fill the gap. In the next example, we're going to close the gap as close as perfect as we can and then watch how the solder flows on it. We're going to flux this ring. The gap fits very nicely on this one. And dry out the flux. Position our solder. Flow the solder into the gap. This is the joint we just filled in the back side. The solder flowed perfectly, filled the gap with no excess flow. This is a very strong joint and be a very nice looking finished piece. The fourth point I'd like to cover is porosity in our solder joints. This is the bubbles, the pits that appear in a solder joint when you're finished soldering. When you go to polish the point, polish the piece, the holes will show up in your solder joint. Our solder is made up of silver, copper, and zinc. As the piece overheats, the zinc will boil out, turn into a gas, and leave these holes behind. The way to prevent this is to solder at the lowest temperature possible and not to overheat the piece. The porosity in the solder joint is caused by the zinc vaporizing. There's only a couple hundred degrees difference between the silver flowing and zinc vaporizing. I posted a chart on my website that explains this in a little more technical detail. Go to the link at the bottom here to take you to the website and see the chart. In tip 5, I'm going to show you why we use flux and what flux actually does. I have 2 pieces of highly oxidized silver here. I'm going to coat them with flux as if we were going to solder them, but I'm just going to run some flame on it to show you how flux cleans the oxidation off and lets solder flow. As the flux begins to boil, you'll see it turn clear, and then just right here as the solder would start to flow, the silver oxidation is actually pulled off. We'll do it one more time on this piece. You can see the clean silver underneath. The silver, when it is oxidized, blocks the flow of solder. The flux pulls the oxidation off and allows the solder to flow underneath it. As you can see here, it went from black back to shiny silver. There's almost a glass over it, a film over it that allows the solder to flow. For the more technical end of it and what the flux actually does, follow the link at the bottom of the page that'll take you for more information on the website. The flux removes some of the contaminations and oxidations and allows the solder to flow properly. I hope these tips help you in making jewelry. These are things that gave me trouble in my career that I've figured out, and I can pass the knowledge on to you. If you like the video, be sure to subscribe and hit the like button. If you have any comments or comments of future videos you'd like to see, be sure to add those. And don't forget to visit our website. Thank you.